Welcome to this next episode of YouTube where we've entitled it First Snow of the Winter, and we'll get to that in a little bit. We want to first thank everybody for their generous support to the Give to the Match Day donations. We ended up raising $43,718 through donations on Give to the Match Day, which met our matching grant of $35,000. And so our total raised for that day ended up at $78,718. So we want to thank everybody for their very generous support in helping us teach world about wolves. We thank you very much, and those funds will go to help our day-to-day operations as well as our ambassador wolves at the International Wolf Center. So we want to personally thank every single one of you that helped to contribute to this magnificent goal. So thank you very much. But I wanted to give you a few updates on our wolves here. So we did see snow, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, but earlier in the week we have been working on our pump housing and getting our UV filter housing ready for next year. We eventually plan to install a UV filter in this structure here so that we can more effectively kill algae in the pond. That again will help us to save on costs for emptying the pond and refilling it. This UV filter is much more effective at killing algae than some of the other methods we've been using in the past, and so we've built a frame around it so that we can house it safely, keep the wolves out of it, and help us to be able to work on it with ease. And so right now what we're doing is we're securing a steel lid on top of the structure, so we're drilling into the concrete. And so what we decided to do is to work on that while the wolves were in there rather than moving them on and off constantly, which can be pretty stressful for the animals. We decided to go ahead and just have our wolf care staff go in there and work on it from the inside. So one of our wolf care staff members are in there drilling and working on securing the lid to this frame here. And as you can see, Bolts is listening in on that drill as it starts up. There was a bit of anxiety at first. As you can see, Bolts has got a slightly tucked tail. He's not too sure about the situation, but you can see that there's still a lot of curiosity with this activity inside of there. It's kind of hard for them to see what's going on in there. They're mostly hearing movements of wolf care staff inside of the frame there, so they were pretty curious for the first day, very curious, and you saw that all of the wolves investigating that area there and checking out the noises and whatnot. But as you can see, that anxiety quickly seemed to dissipate and more curiosity seemed to take over. And so this is Denali heading on top of the frame while wolf care staff are in there working on the bolts and bolting of the ceiling to the top. But later on in the week, they tended to ignore our work. We were working on this throughout the week, making sure that we can get all of the bolts into the frame, and so it took quite a while. It took a couple of days to get through that, and eventually the wolves tended to ignore us when we started working on the frame. They tended to go back to their regular activities. This is shortly after Luna began a chase, or invite chase, up the hill, and she started having the rest of the pack chase her around. This lasted for quite a while. Luna was definitely the source of the activity that day. But you can see the entire pack is coming in on this activity level. But Aiden got a little bit of a grab bite in there. But you quickly saw how quickly, when the energy was redirected towards Aiden from Luna, how quickly Bolt started to turn his attention towards Aiden. He's still looking to test every now and then Aiden's status, but Aiden's still holding himself pretty well. But later on in the week, we started getting a little bit of freezing rain, which eventually turned into snow and was sort of a mix here at this point. You can see Bolts has got a little bit of blood on his nose from a fawn that we had fed earlier to the pack. We had given them a fawn carcass, and Aiden was possessing it, but Bolts got a little bit of it there. You can see there's a decent amount of blood on his muzzle and his paws there. He had gotten a little bit of the fawn earlier that day too. But he's going to be doing what we call a face wipe behavior. This is a grooming behavior to help get debris off of his muzzle, so help get some debris off of his face. And also he'll get into licking off some of the blood from his paws. We tend to see this behavior a lot whenever there's a feeding. Shortly after, we see a lot of this behavior. In fact, in one of our webinars, Denali featured this behavior during our live webinars, and so this is a pretty common behavior after feeding. But after the mix sort of started, we stopped. We eventually got into more of a snowfall later in the day, and eventually started to accumulate overnight. And we quickly had about almost 5 inches of snow. The next day, we actually measured about 4.8 inches of snowfall overnight. So we had quite a bit of a dumping overnight, and the wolves tended to and seemed to enjoy it. There was a lot of activity that night and the next morning. This is the next morning after the snowfall. You can see there's quite a bit of activity. This sort of activity level was going on through most of the morning. A lot of chasing behavior, lots of interactions between the pack members, and we tried to capture as much of it as possible. But we also have other responsibilities of making sure that the enclosure is safe, that no large branches have fallen on the fences, and making sure our wolves are safe and healthy as well, which they all did very well. They're all quite excited about the snow. And you can see there's again a lot of the play behavior going on between, especially Luna and Bolts, but Denali's jumping in there quite a bit. Aiden did eventually join in the activity this day. He was pretty full from the carcass that we had fed, and so he was taking it easy for the most part that day. He is on medications for some of his stomach issues. He tends to have some reactions after eating a large meal, and so it helps us to give those medications shortly after and shortly before his feedings. And so we did so, and he's quickly got back into the activity levels with the rest of the pack as the snow progressed. He was running around with the rest of the pack for quite a while, investigating the area, and he was also very keen on the activity in the yard, and so he was certainly engaged throughout the time that we had a decent amount of snowfall. We did eventually, that weekend, we did lose our snow. There was quite a bit of rain that helped to melt it away, but we're already, as I'm composing this YouTube, we've already got some more snow on the ground, and we're forecasted to have more snow later in the week. Actually, come Sunday, we're supposed to get some more snow even further. And so we've been preparing, we've been winterizing quite a bit of the wolf yard, making sure that everything is ready for winter. That includes taking wheelbarrows in, making sure that anything that could be damaged by cold weather, such as hoses, etc., have been taken into the lab, making sure that all of our equipment is ready, and making sure the wolves are prepared for winter as well. They've got warm winter coats to keep them protected, but we also like to give some straw in the dens to provide a warm place for them to rest if they so choose. But they are well equipped for winter. The wolves do very well for themselves during the winter time, and this is an excellent time to see them during the time of year. Now, over in retirement, this is a little bit earlier in the week. This is Grizzard. This is shortly after we were getting prepared for winter. We are getting some straw into the dens and getting some straw into his enclosure, making sure he's getting ready. We're also insulating some ground for some work on the expansion of the wolf lab, and so we're bringing a lot of straw in, but it's sometimes a little difficult filming Grizzer when we're mostly interacting with him. We do try to spend more time with him since he is alone. We want to make sure that he gets plenty of interaction with staff. But sometimes there are some stimuli in his enclosure, such as this tree. It's been a long dead tree for quite a while, and one of our wolf care staff practically leaned on it and it fell over. So Grizzer seemed to enjoy the stimulus in his enclosure. He has been known to be somewhat fixated on trees. Every now and then he's been known to take down a tree or two, smaller trees, but he it seems to enjoy taking a whack at some of the dead trees as they fall down. So Grizzly spent a good lot of activity with this log here, or this tree, felled tree. I seem to enjoy himself quite a bit. Again, we are managing him as an individual animal, and so we do try to spend a lot of our time conducting wolf terror, but we try to spend a lot of our time with him so that he has that social interaction. And he did get snow, obviously. He did get quite a bit of snow. He seems to enjoy it quite a bit. That's the end of his Drizzard 500. We tried to do as much of it as we can without shaking the camera too much. But that is about it. So we want to thank you all for your generous donations, and we will see you next week. Thank you for watching.